Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks again for inviting me here to talk about the EarthScope Plate Boundary Observatory, Alaska region. What I'm going to talk about today is just our experience in the first 4 years following construction, which was completed in 2008. I know it's getting late in the afternoon, so I'll try to keep this moving along fast and interesting so people stay awake out there. So I'm just going to begin with this slide, which I've seen in most of the talks up to now. And it's just, it shows the distribution of the EarthScope stations in the lower 48 in Alaska. And given that this is a Alaska session this afternoon, I just kind of wanted to turn this around a little bit for everybody and give you a little more Alaska-centric perspective on the EarthScope project to start this out. As you know, the PBO network construction was completed in 2008. It consists of 1,100 continuous GPS stations, 74 deep borehole strain meters, 6 long baseline laser strain meters, and 78 seismic borehole seismometers, and 26 shallow tilt meter stations. Just to zoom in on the Alaska network again, you can see Alaska is obviously pretty large in size relative to the lower 48, so obviously very important. And the network in Alaska is shown by the red dots on this map. We've got a total of 138 continuous GPS stations operational right now and 12 tilt meter stations. It's interesting to point out that the most eastern station in the PBO network is in Alaska. That's AC-60 Shimia, way out there in the Aleutians, as well as the most western station in the PBO network at AC-66 Amchitka, and also the most northern station at SG-27 in Barrow, Alaska. That's just another reason why Alaska is the most extreme part of the network, in my opinion. As everybody's talked about before, Alaska is a really interesting and tectonically active place to work. This is just a map kind of showing historic earthquakes and active volcanoes in Alaska, and obviously shows the importance of a project like EarthScope and having the PBO have a presence in Alaska and also bringing the array up there in the coming years. EarthScope, though, at its core, is really about the people, and the UNAVCO Plate Boundary Observatory office is no different. And I just really need to spend a minute to introduce the people who work full-time on the PBO Observatory in Alaska. It's all their hard work and dedication that really makes sure that this network keeps running as well as it does, and that we get the data back to the archive that you folks enjoy using. From left to right, there's Ellie Boyce. She's wearing a mosquito head net in this photo. This also illustrates some of the hardships that engineers face while working in Alaska. Obviously, she's trying to keep the voracious mosquitoes at bay. Ryan Bierma, pictured in the middle, is doing his best to fend off some of the more dangerous wild animals we encounter while in the field. And Heidi Willoughby is prepared for working out in the wilds of Alaska there. So not only are the people different in Alaska, but the stations are also different in Alaska. So I know many of you are familiar with a typical PBO station, and part of this will look really familiar to you. That's the monument on the right side of the photo there. That's just the GPS antenna and a radome and a standard short drill brace monument into bedrock. But on the left side of the photo, we have a electronics enclosure hut. And the reason we have this is because in Alaska, we obviously have a lack of sunlight in the winter, which necessitates us, we have to have a larger battery bank to power the station during the dark. The station has a total of 24 12-volt, 100 amp hour batteries installed to provide power for the station for up to 4 months of complete darkness. And just so you know that it doesn't always look quite as nice as that photo I just showed you, this is more representative of what a station experiences in the winter in Alaska. This is a station on Unimac Island in the Aleutians, AV-29, and this photo was actually taken last June, about June 7th or so, and you can see that there was still quite a bit of snow and ice preventing access to that GPS station. So now you know a little bit of background about the project in Alaska. You're probably curious about what we've been doing since 2008, so the last 4 years. Well, in a nutshell, we've been operating and maintaining that network of stations. This includes the GPS stations, the tilt meters, and also several data comms relay stations, which are required in Alaska since we don't have the same comms capabilities and internet connections readily available. So we have to relay data back to a place where we have a good, solid internet connection to get data back to the archive. So what exactly is operation and maintenance? Well, I kind of categorize it in 4 different ways. First, you have routine maintenance, and that's anything like a battery swap or clearing vegetation away from a GPS antenna. Basically, just anything that you can do that is preventative in nature and doesn't necessarily mean that the station was in failure mode when you visited it. This makes up the bulk of what we do in Alaska. Probably the thing that we do the second most would be the unplanned maintenance visits, and that's where you're going out to repair a station that's failed, whether that be weather-related damage or animal damage or something else. We're also constantly working on ways to improve our network and the stations in our network, as well as harden them. And by that I mean we're looking at ways to improve the power systems at our stations so they're more robust, as well as working on new data telemetry solutions, which will enable the stations to be on more of the time and hopefully enable real-time data telemetry at some of our stations in Alaska as well. Another thing we do is participate in response activities. When there's an earthquake or a volcanic eruption, we can enable real-time streaming or high-rate data downloads on GPS stations. And in some cases, we can even make emergency visits to stations to be able to make repairs if it's safe to do so, economically feasible, and it's a really important target. In the interest of time, I'm really just going to focus on routine maintenance and unplanned maintenance and describe those a little bit more in detail. I know these might sound a little bit mundane and boring to a lot of people out there, but I think these are really important things to understand and something that really doesn't get talked about a lot at these conferences. So I'm going to begin with routine maintenance by talking about a project we worked on last year in 2012 on Unimac Island. Unimac Island is the first in the Aleutian chain. It's about 800 miles southwest of Anchorage. Lost my location map on this, sorry about that. But this is a map showing Unimac Island and the distribution of PBO stations on Unimac and around the volcanoes of Unimac. There are 16 of these stations out there. Last year we were able to get to 15 of these 16. Each one of these stations had 24 batteries, as I described before, except for AV35, which is on Unimac Island. It's actually a data repeater that has a lot of extra comms gear at it, so it has a higher power requirement. To put that in perspective, that's about 56,000 pounds of batteries that we had to move around Unimac Island and get there. That's about the equivalent of fully loading 2 C-130 Hercules cargo aircraft full of batteries, so it's a lot of lead to move around, basically. And also very logistically challenging. Unimac Island, as I said before, about 800 miles away from Anchorage. There's no road access, similar to a lot of places in Alaska. There's no roads on the island. In fact, there's only one settlement on the island. It's on the eastern tip, a town called False Pass. So the way we were able to support this project was by using a research vessel, in this case the RV Kittiwake, which is pictured here. This is actually a converted Bering Sea crab boat that's now been converted to use as a research vessel. It's got a heli deck on there, and it's got a large hold which can accommodate all the batteries you can possibly carry. So we would use this as a mobile base camp, essentially, and moor it in anchorages that were close to groups of stations on Unimac to enable us to really efficiently support the project out there. A typical battery replacement on Unimac Island wasn't that different from any other site that we support in Alaska. It basically involved the removal of 24 batteries and the installation of 24 new batteries. These take roughly 5 helicopter trips. Usually there's one out to bring the crew out to the site and all the tools and whatever other gear they might need. You've got 3 trips to bring batteries to the site, and then on those trips you also bring the old batteries back, and then finally 1 trip to move engineers to the next site or bring them back to the base camp. Sounds pretty straightforward, but in actuality, as you can see from these photos, it's actually a little more complicated than that in the field. like I indicated in the picture I showed earlier, there was a lot of late season snow on Unimac Island, and this station, AV38, that I have pictured here, was no exception. The engineers had to dig their way into the hut before they could even start removing the batteries from that site. And then you see just pictured below that just kind of the difficulty of moving these large batteries around in a really fast-paced environment like we have on our sites. And just a nice image there of a little artistic image of batteries ready for install at Unimac. And I just wanted to show this photo of AV29 again, just to mention that I did say that we only got to 15 of 16 sites on Unimac. This was the 16th site. We tried to get to the station a couple times, but even by the time we were ready to leave, it still hadn't melted out enough for us to be able to safely dig into that station. So we do plan to return to that site this year when we're working in the area and do the battery replacement there. The other thing we work on a lot in Alaska is obviously unplanned maintenance. Anything that can happen will happen. The example I'm going to use is from a station on Augustine Island. This is AV19. Augustine Island is located in Cook Inlet. It's just actually pretty close to Anchorage, Alaska, and it's also where Augustine Volcano is. Augustine Volcano erupted in the end of 2005. And we came back. This was actually in 2011. The station had been operational. The station, just to back up a little bit, the station was actually built as a response to the eruption in 2005. And the station had been working just fine the whole time. We happened to be in the area doing some other maintenance, and this station was close by, so we decided to drop in and see how it was doing. And we're rather surprised by what we saw, and when we found this boulder had rolled down the flank of the volcano and impacted the side of the hut there, causing quite a bit of damage, as you can see. Unfortunately, we did not have a replacement hut with us, and also probably the right tools to do the job, but we were able to improvise and get the boulder away from the hut so we could actually make some temporary repairs. And here's our temporary repair, and this station is still working and fully operational now. And it just shows kind of the ability of our engineers and just the fact that you have to, whenever you're working in Alaska, be ready for just about anything and be able to adapt to whatever you might find on site. Next year, we do plan on going to the site and replacing the hut and relocating it to a location where it's safer from rockfall. So that's a lot of work that I just talked about, and I'm sure you're wondering, is this work, does it have any benefit? Well, I think it does, and I think if you look at this, this is a plot showing data communications at PBO Alaska sites and the improvement of communications since the end of the project in 2008 until the end of 2012. So the blue dots represent stations that have any kind of communication. So this is a station that's up at least long enough to get an SOH ping and probably download a daily file each day. The green dots represent stations that are up at least 20 hours a day. So this would be a station that might be viable for more than just daily downloads. And the gray dots are stations that are without comms or when the data was plotted had a failure status for their communications. As you can see, we've been continually improving network communications in Alaska and are rapidly approaching our goal of having all of our 138 stations capable of auto-archiving and hopefully on 24 hours a day. Well, this plot didn't display properly. I'm not sure why. It's so the gist of this was that if you could see this, most of our stations, even without comms, when we look at data return. So even a station that lost comms, we go back and pick up the data either manually or get the comms back operational at a later date. most of these stations end up with 100% data return. Now, in the instance of some stations, you have a receiver failure or other electronics failure, you'll end up with less than 100%. But if you could see the data on this, you would see that we have about 70 stations out of 138 that have had 100% data return for their entire life. About 31 stations that have 95 to 99% data return, and the rest are somewhere below that. And with that, I think I'm just about out of time, so I'm going to put this up here. This is a plot just showing, or a map showing possible co-located stations with the U.S. array. I think this is a nice segue into Bob's talk, so I'll stop there.
Thank you.